Everybody, I'm so happy to see you all. Transportation, Land Use, and Housing has got a wonderful program for us today. Bob Pendoley is going to be talking about a very positive thing, getting to yes on housing. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say. Before we, and also Voter Service has some news for you about the Student Elections Ambassador Program. But there is no Monday member meeting in August. We're taking the month off. Stay tuned for news about events in the fall. We're still planning. So, and we'll send out those wonderful announcements so you know what's going on. Now, speaking of announcements, does anybody besides Voter Service have any announcements they would like to make? Barbara?
I just want to thank everyone. Several people have donated diapers to the families in the Canal area and left them at my house. Thank you, thank you. And I know from Canal Alliance that the families are still needing them. If you would like to, size 5, 6 diapers or baby wipes. And if you'll contact me, I give you directions to my house. And then once a week, I take them to Canal Alliance when someone's in the office. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Would you put your email in the chat so people have
Sure.
an easy way to contact you? Okay, any other announcements? Okay, well, I will turn this over to Robin then.
Hi, I'm Robin Diedrich, and I am currently serving as a chair of our League's Voter Service Committee. And I'm excited to be speaking with you today to share some information about the Marin County Student Elections Ambassador Program. The program was established in 2018 and has been growing ever since. Last year, we had over 40 participants, and the program expanded to include recent high school graduates. This program is a joint venture of the Marin County Elections Department, Marin County Office of Education, and our local League of Women Voters. The team leading this program includes Megan Stone from the Elections Department, Pam Cook, Jackie Dagg, Lynn Dooley, and Vita Harbund from our league, and Bella Manis, a 2020 ambassador who is continuing in the program, as well as serving as an intern and consultant to the team. We're adding a link to the Elections Department website where you can find information about the program, including an application in the chat box. You can just look down there and there'll be a link. Today, we are sharing 2 videos about the Election Ambassador Program. The first is an introductory video created by Bella Manis in both English and Spanish. And thank you to Bella for creating these and to the Canal Alliance for their assistance with the Spanish translation. And I understand that we have Lydia here who actually worked on it. So thank you so much, Lydia. The second video is a testimonial that includes experiences of several former ambassadors. Please note that the audio may be slightly out of sync due to the nature of showing it on Zoom. We practiced it and it looks pretty good, but don't worry if it's out of sync, it's all fine on the real video. These videos are posted on the Marin County Elections Department website, as I mentioned, and our league will also be posting them on our website, marinlwv.org. We'll put that in the chat too, and we'll be sharing them on social media as well. We're recruiting right now for the program, so please spread the word about this impactful program with friends, family, and anyone you think might be interested. Thank you.
Okay, so are we ready to share the first video?
Yes, go. Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Bella, and I'm here to introduce the new Student Elections Ambassador Program. This program is an expansion of the former High School Election Ambassador Program formed in 2018, but will now include students of all ages. The program was created to encourage teens and young adults to take part in democracy, whether or not they are yet able to vote. It allows students to not only get informed on the voting and registering process, but to lead their peers in doing the same. Low youth voter turnout often comes from a lack of preparation and engagement in the electoral process. This program aims to give young people the tools they need to become ready to vote when the time comes. This program creates leaders by allowing students to inspire change throughout their student body and help build the foundation for a new generation of voters in their community. Student ambassadors will have the opportunity to collaborate and lead their own outreach projects, educating their fellow classmates about registering and pre-registering to vote and about the civic importance of voting. If you are interested in becoming an ambassador, visit marinvotes.org to learn more. We look forward to working with you as a Marin County Student Elections Ambassador.
Thank you.
Hi! If you're interested in being a student ambassador, then you've come to the right place. I'm Bella, a high school student and a youth ambassador, and I'm here to introduce you to this program and some fellow advocates for it. The Student Ambassador Program is about creating leadership skills, educating your peers, and becoming an important part of the future of your community. Now let's hear from some fellow student ambassadors about their experiences in this program.
Ever since I was a child, democracy and elections have always fascinated me. But as I entered high school, I was shocked to discover just how few young adults actually vote. In 2018, I helped launch the Marin County High School Elections Ambassador Program.
I originally got involved because my grandma was in the League of Women Voters, and I grew up seeing her go to meetings and constantly talking about the League.
I wanted to be a student election ambassador and got involved because civic engagement is super important to me. The 2020 presidential election was a big election, and I wasn't old enough to vote, but I still wanted to make an impact.
One of the reasons I joined the ambassador program was to be more civically engaged and understand the election process better, and that is exactly what I got out of it.
I was able to host a mock election for my school, which the program gave me the tools to do, and it also helped me help other students at my school become more civically engaged and help them pre-register and register to vote.
Not only did it give me insight into how to run voter drives and recruit poll workers, but it allowed me to connect with my peers and community on a deeper level.
I got to talk to a lot of younger people, high school students, about registering to vote. I remember not knowing a lot at first. It was really simple to find out where to register, how to register, when to vote. I got to talk to a lot of knowledgeable people on the subject and voting rights, and I learned a lot from the experience, and I'm very grateful for the experience.
I organized a registration and pre-registration drive at my school during a period designated for homework on National Voter Registration Day to register my fellow classmates and prepare them to vote.
I educated students about how to register to vote and encouraged them to vote. I also was an election poll worker, which was an exciting and rewarding experience.
They gave me all the tools and resources I needed in order to reach out and use my platform to help young voters with information and registration and all of that good stuff.
It was honestly an amazing opportunity, and I feel like it really helped a lot of other people. And I really recommend participating in this program if you're interested in government and voting and civic engagement too.
I would strongly recommend that you become a student elections ambassador if you're looking to make a meaningful difference in your community and learn skills that will serve you as a student and beyond.
I made a difference, and this program gave me the platform to do that, and I had the most amazing experience, and I would 100% recommend this for anybody who is passionate about politics or even just making a difference in general.
It's exciting to know that I made some sort of difference in my school and in my county by getting my fellow students to participate in the voting process. And in the end, I learned a lot about elections as well.
I had a great experience, and I'm happy to share it with everybody, and I love talking about it. So thank you so much.
I just love those people.
Yay!
Cute.
Well, I thought it was amazing. I really, really love it all, especially testimonials. But I wanted to take a minute here while we have Lydia joining us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Lydia. Would you like to say a few words about your experience, either with the videos or the program, or both?
I mean, honestly, I don't really have a whole lot of experience. I'm good friends with Bella Manis. We go to school together and we've like been friends since middle school. And so she just kind of referred me to the program and sent me like the application. So this is honestly like my first meeting that I've been to, and my only real involvement has been with the like Spanish videos. But yeah, I'm just really excited to be here and like learn more, and yeah.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you being here and your work on the videos. It's so important to have these language translations done by native speakers so that they are done appropriately for people who are listening to them. Thank you so much. So again, we put the elections department website link in the chat, and I put our league website, but I will also put a direct link to our voter service webpage where you can see some information and a link to the videos. And if you're on social media, you can start looking, follow our league, and you'll see the videos on there. Thank you so much. And now I think we're going to move on to Kevin, to the transportation, land use, and housing portion of the meeting. We appreciate, Kevin, your committee sharing some time with us to share these videos.
Thanks, Robin. My name is Kevin Haggerty, and I'm the acting chair of the League's Transportation, Land Use, and Housing Committee. I want to thank you for joining us today. I think you'll find this presentation to be both informative and interesting. Developing and building additional housing, and more importantly, affordable housing for workers and seniors in Marin is a major challenge facing the county today. This is further complicated with the drought and wildfire risk. In the next 16 months, Marin County and its 11 cities and towns will be required to develop a housing element plan for the period of 2023 to 2031 that will identify how each jurisdiction will accommodate the state mandated housing allocations. Mr. Pendoley will review what a housing element plan is, why it is important, and how residents can use it to promote affordable housing for their communities. At the end of Mr. Pendoley's presentation, I will share with you what the Transportation, Land Use, and Housing Committee is doing to promote housing, and let you know how you can become more involved in this effort. So let me introduce Bob. Mr. Pendoley has been a professional planner for 37 years. In his career, he served as planning director for Solano County, the city of San Rafael, the town of Corte, and the town of Corte, Madera. Bob is an active member with the League's Transportation, Land Use, and Housing Committee. He's currently serves on the board of directors of the Marin Environmental Housing Collaborative and is an active member with the Marin Organizing Committee. Bob has lived in San Rafael since 1989. With that, I'd like to introduce Bob Pendoley.
Thank you, Kevin. Let's see if I can do this. If I can share the screen. Uh-oh, here we go. Okay. Well, over the next 16 months, there are at least 3 leverage points that can be used to promote housing production in Marin, especially affordable housing. First, the counties, cities, and towns will be updating their housing elements between now and January 2023. Advocates can impact this process to get to real results. So let's talk about what's in the housing element. In 1969, in response to the civil rights movement, California passed a law requiring that every city have a housing element. Its purpose is to prevent local communities from perpetuating racial segregation by zoning out affordable housing. The housing element is part of every city's general plan. And as you know, the general plan is a long-range plan for the city's development. The housing element differs a little bit in that it only covers an 8-year period. This is called the 8-year housing element cycle. It must include an analysis of housing needs, analysis of constraints that work against meeting that need, policies and programs to support affordable housing, and a list of sites with the potential for additional multi-unit affordable housing to achieve RHNA numbers. So it's very much focused on affordable housing. And finally, the city must zone enough land to accommodate the need. Can I have the next slide, please? Next slide.
Oh, this is the RHNA slide?
Right. The regional housing needs allocation, Rena? Okay. The regional housing needs allocation is determined by the Association of Bay Area Governments. It's based on projected job growth, transportation capacity, and the population growth trends, both in the county and in each of the individual cities. The RHNA numbers specify the number of units by income levels that will be needed for the next 8-year cycle, including very low income, moderate income, and above moderate income. In other words, it's the full range of incomes. And RHNA must be consistent with the Planned Bay Area Development Pattern. That's the regional plan that covers the entire Bay Area. Could I have the next slide, please? Next slide. Okay. These are the current RHNA numbers for the next 8-year cycle. So for example, the city of Belvedere will be expected to plan for 160 units. Some of these numbers are really large. The city of Novato will be required to plan for over 2,000 units. San Rafael will have north of 3,200 units, and the county will have the biggest allocation. Board of Supervisors is going to be required to plan for almost 3,600 units between now and the period out to 2031. The next slide. So what's the leverage? Why is the housing element important? What are the points that are going to, what can you grab hold of to kind of affect the outcome of the housing element? Well, first of all, the housing element is critical to the city's development. If a local jurisdiction doesn't have an adequate housing element, that's a housing element that's been approved by the state, they may not be able to issue permits. This actually happened to the city of Corte, Madera more than 10 years ago. They went through a period of almost 2 years in which they were not allowed to issue any building permits for new construction except for repairs. The local jurisdiction, whether it's the county or the city, will appoint an advisory committee of some sort. It usually includes citizens as well as planning commissioners, members of the city council, and they'll be responsible for drafting the housing element. The housing element will ultimately be evaluated by the state to determine whether the policies that are proposed are really effective. The state will want to see whether the sites are realistic. The California Department of Housing and Community Development has the ability to issue fines in the event that a city ultimately refuses to prepare an adequate housing element. And California Housing and Community Development, which ultimately will review the housing element for compliance with the law, wants to hear your comments. So these are all leverage points. You may have the ability to join your local advisory committee. You certainly have the legal right to attend all of their meetings, which must be public, so you can speak up. You can talk to the effectiveness of proposed policies. Probably most important, you can comment on whether the sites that are proposed for housing are realistic. Is it really realistic to propose that open space is going to be converted to housing? Probably not in Marin County. Is it realistic to propose that offices in your local downtown will be converted to housing? That may be realistic. It has happened in some of Marin cities, but it'll be important for you to comment. Let's have the next slide here. each city is required to prepare and submit to the California Department of Housing and Community Development an annual performance report. And they have to report on how many units have actually been applied for in the past 12 months, how many of those homes were actually approved for development, how many homes actually got built, and how affordable were they based on the four affordability ranges, very low income, moderate, and market rate. I think maybe I'll stop here for a minute and see if I can answer questions. Okay, I'm not hearing anything.
I don't see anything in the chat at the moment.
Okay.
So
All right.
Back to the presentation and take it up from there.
Okay, let's move on. Next slide, the annual performance report. I explained that this has to be submitted to the state every year. It usually gets prepared in December, January, February of the year, and it's due by April. And in this report, the city is required to explain how many units have been approved for development, how many actually got built, and so on. So how are we doing? This graph shows each of the reported jurisdictions in Marin County and how well they're doing. Corte Madera is doing very well, particularly with market rate housing. That's the green bar that you see. And they're doing fairly well with lower income housing here. Fairfax is doing exceptionally well with lower income housing, and that's due to the Victory Village Senior Housing Project that they approved a couple of years ago. On the other hand, San Rafael, which actually is usually one of the highest producers, is not very far along at all. They're well below 50% on all of their goals. And there are only a couple of years left to this. There's only 2 years left to this cycle. So they have a significant problem. I would say that San Rafael is trying to address their problem by looking at their fee structure. And we'll see how they make out. Tiburon has not performed well at all. County of Marin is doing at 3/4 of the way through the process. The County of Marin is doing fairly well. They're exceeding their goals for market rate housing, but they're a little bit shy on very low income housing. Next slide, please. So where's the leverage on the annual performance report? Well, the annual performance report has to be approved at a public hearing in front of the city council or the board of supervisors, depending what jurisdiction you're in. And you have an opportunity to speak up. If you feel that your city council is not doing well, say so. Point out what you see as the shortcomings. On the other hand, it's important to congratulate them on their successes. If I lived in Fairfax, I would be really happy to congratulate them on how well they're doing with low-income housing since they approved the Victory Village project. And finally, when you make your criticism, look at the housing element. What did the housing element say was going to be accomplished? Give praise and criticism depending on what the city council said it was going to do. And finally, the project approval process. The housing element will outline potential projects that can be built over the next 8 years. Look at those and decide what's important. Know what you want. Get organized with your affiliate group, for example, the League of Women Voters, and decide on what your targets are. And then testify at the Planning Commission hearings when projects are being proposed for development. You need to be ready to lobby the elected officials, the city council members, for example, and testify at public hearings. And finally, I'd like to suggest a case study. In San Rafael, as you probably know, the Northgate Mall has been proposed for redevelopment. The developer proposes to include almost 1,400 housing units in the project. This would be a significant accomplishment for the city of San Rafael if it can be approved and developed. It would meet the Northgate Mall with 1,400 units would meet almost 50% of the city's regional housing needs allocation for the next 8 years. So in one swell swoop, if you will, they could be halfway there. But there are things to think about. Certainly there is opposition. There is concern about water, for example. There are concerns about view impacts. In this view, you can see 5 stories, 2 stories of commercial with 3 stories of residential above it. And that's going to be a concern to some people. A particular concern may be the affordable housing component. San Rafael's rules would require that at least 10% of the units, 140 of them, should be affordable. How should that happen? The developer is proposing to donate a portion of the property to an affordable housing developer who would, in fact, build those 140 units, and they'd be off in one separate section of the project. An alternative way to do it, that's preferred by many housing advocates, would be to disperse those units throughout the market rate units. And the feeling is that that achieves better integration, both economically, ethnically, and just in terms of overall equity. The counter argument to that is that, well, if these units are built separately, often a portion of the property and managed by a nonprofit developer, the track record is that the nonprofits have great success in Marin County. Their projects look good and they're always managed well. But Northgate Mall, I think, can be a case study in how you follow a project, how you lobby for what you want. You have at least 2 clear choices here in terms of affordable housing availability. I think with that, I'd like to stop and try to answer any questions you might have on what's the housing element, what's the RENA number really about, how do you get to yes on housing? And thanks for your time on this.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hi, Bob.
I can.
It's Barbara Rowe.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi. So how will the towns be handled who have decided they don't want to try to set a goal of housing elements at the recommended number? I mean, what's going to happen on those?
Well, I'd say that remains to be seen. First of all, I believe that if a town submitted a housing element to California Housing and Community Development that basically refused to plan for the RENA number, the full RENA number, the state would declare it out of conformance with the law. And that would certainly open to litigation. I am really not sure what the specific enforcement techniques that HCD could use. It's at a minimum, it has the ability to fine a city. But I think, the local example is what happened to Corte, Madera 10 to 15 years ago, where Corte found that they didn't have an adequate housing element, and essentially they shut down major portions of the building permit operation.
Thank you.
Bob, I have a question, and this is very basic. Is the housing element, I know you said it was put together by the government, but is it based on the census? And will it be updated with the upcoming census?
The RENA numbers, you mean?
Yes.
It's based in part on the census. The numbers are originally generated by the California Department of Finance. They do extensive statewide studies and then studies in the individual regions to identify trends and to make projections. And one of the databases that they start with is the federal census.
Thank you. Kate Powers has a question. Would you tell us how very low, low, moderate, and above moderate, how very low, low, moderate, and above moderate income housing are defined?
Yeah, it starts with the notion of affordability. The federal government for many, many years has had a standard that says that if a household is paying more than 30% of its annual income for housing, then it's overpaying. Now, from a policy point of view, neither the state nor the federal government have any particular concern about households that are making more than 120% of the local average income. There's not a big concern about whether those households are overpaying. The notion is they're doing it by choice. They have options. They have enough money that they have the option to get a house or an apartment that's less expensive. The bigger concern is for a household, let's say a low income household that's maybe only making 80% of the average income for the area. If they are paying more than 30% of their income for housing, they're having trouble at the grocery store. They may not be able to adequately clothe their children. If the car suddenly dies, they're going to have a hard time buying a new one. If you're moderate income, or rather low income, your income is less than 80% of the area average, your lifestyle is severely constrained. So that's the basic notion. I guess the other thing I should explain is that there are 4 income categories that are identified by the federal government and that are used by all of the states. The first is called very low income, and those are incomes that, if I remember right, they're from 0 to 15% of the average income from the area. Then low income is from 15 up to 50%. And then, no, let's see, the first one I gave you is extremely low income, then it goes low income, which is from 15 to 50%, and then 50 to 80% is moderate income, and after that is above moderate.
Okay, it looks like Lauren Vreeland Long has a question. Is there a mandate to develop housing for older adults?
Yes. One of the requirements of the housing element is that in addition to identifying the needs of households based on their income, you also have to identify specific groups. For example, seniors. How many seniors do you have in your community? How many are overpaying? And do they have special needs? For example, seniors have, let's see, special needs. Many seniors have a need for housing that provides services for seniors, residential care facilities, and so those needs would need to be analyzed. Similarly, you need to analyze the housing needs of specific income groups. Ethnic groups. You also need to analyze the needs of female-headed households. Housing needs are broken down by other groupings in addition to income, including seniors.
And thank you. That's great. Thank you. And Ann Wakely has a question.
It's just a clarification question, and you may have actually already answered this, Bob, but I'm still trying to really understand this. And what I would like to know, when you talk about area, when you're determining if people who live in an area are paying more than 30% of their income for housing, how's the area defined?
Areas, the U.S. Department of Commerce breaks the nation up into very distinct areas by income. And Marin and the city of San Francisco, as I remember, are a distinct area for income analysis. And I forget what that grouping is actually called. But the Bay Area is broken up into either 2 or 3 statistical areas by the U.S. Department of Commerce for purposes of such as analyzing income.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Please.
So in Marin County, the income of the people who actually live here on average is pretty high. But the income of people who might choose to live here because they work here and live elsewhere tends to be lower.
Right.
So how is that in any way factored in? I mean, if you're just counting Marin and San Francisco, you're going to get very different numbers than if you count people who work in Marin, might choose to live in Marin, but can't because it costs too much.
That's a great question. And that's from an advocate's point of view, the beauty of the regional housing needs allocation, because in addition to looking at the incomes of the people who are already here, it looks at transportation patterns, for example. How many people do we have commuting in? It looks at job patterns. How many jobs do we have that we basically classify as local, as low income? Today, we've started to call these folks essential workers. For example, how much does a server make at a restaurant? And how many server jobs do we have in Marin County? So the regional needs allocation looks at those factors. It's not just a question of who's living here, but also who works here and has to commute from out of county simply because they can't afford it.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful.
So I think we have time for a couple more before Kevin. Kevin, do you want to jump in now? Before
I had a couple of things that maybe Bob could address that might be interesting. One question is, a lot of towns and cities are appealing their housing levels. So the question is, and they appeal it to ABAG, the Bay Area governments. If ABAG decides to accept their appeal, how does that work? And then my second question is sort of the elephant in the room. There's been a lot of conversation about the effect of new housing on the drought, water restrictions. So Bob, maybe you could comment on both those questions?
Sure. There is an appeal process, and a number of the cities and the county have decided to appeal to the Association of Bay Area Governments. ABAG has until December to make decisions on those appeals. So what happens if an appeal is granted? If San Rafael appealed, and ABAG looked at the appeal and said, yeah, we think your number is 100 units too high. They then have to distribute those 100 units among the rest of the county. So the overall allocation for the whole county never gets reduced by an appeal. A second consideration is that ABAG almost never grants appeals. So the appeal process may turn out to be a moot exercise. With regard to the drought, in my opinion, the Marin Municipal Water District did an excellent job when they responded to questions about the impact of new housing on water usage. They opined that if we added 1,000 new residential hookups, the impact on water demand would be 1%. And based on that, so far, the water district has said they do not plan to impose a moratorium on new housing hookups.
Okay, I think Jackie has a question, and so does Cheryl. a couple actually. So let's start with Cheryl. Please comment. I've heard it stated that policies requiring a certain percentage affordable homes discourages development. I think that came out of a study from Portland, Oregon. And she also adds, did the state change its methodology for this current cycle? Why are the numbers so much greater? Those are her two questions from Cheryl.
I think people are really going to disagree on the first question. Does the affordable housing requirement discourage housing development? Honestly, from a professional point of view, as a person who's responsible for looking at real numbers and so on, I'd have to say I don't really know the answer to that. I think the biggest problem in Marin starts with number one, the shortage of sites. And I would argue that the shortage of sites has more to do with zoning policy than it does with any kind of crowding that's going on in any of our cities. If all you've got left is large lots for single family homes, and you're not getting much housing development, I would say the answer is to consider upzoning to allow for apartments and what is now planned for single family. Mill Valley, to their credit, has looked at that issue recently with a piece of surplus city property. And they're studying the feasibility of allowing multifamily. So they're creating space. What I have heard most often from developers is the first problem they have is just finding land that's available to develop, and that availability really has more to do with zoning than it does for any shortage of square footage. And what was the other part of that question?
Did the state change its methodology for this current cycle? Why are the numbers so much higher?
Well, that's really widely debated. The numbers are certain. The number that came down from the state is certainly higher than previous numbers. The state folks argue that these are realistic numbers that are based on job development projections. Beyond that, I honestly wouldn't know how to comment.
Okay. And then one last question before we have, and I think we still have time for Kevin. Jackie Dagg says, are the homeless figured into the income brackets, or are they a separate category? Do the hotel rooms being used to house some of the homeless count in the equation, or are they temporary housing?
I'm not first to answer the last part of the question. I'm not sure which of the new homeless facilities that have been proposed, which are permanent and which are temporary. What I will say is that when the cities prepare their housing elements, they're going to have to make those distinctions when they're analyzing how much housing is available and how much is needed. So they'll, permanent homeless housing will be called out as a specific part of the equation, as will the temporary housing. So the distinction will be made. And yes, the homeless are counted as a kind of a separate category of need. As I explained a little bit ago, the first cut in terms of analysis of need is by income groups, very low, moderate, et cetera. But then you have to analyze distinct social groups, including by ethnicity, by the gender of head of household, and certainly by homelessness.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your answering questions. And Kevin has some comments, and we certainly have time for more questions afterwards. So no problem.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. And Bob, thank you very much. As you can all see, this housing issue is fairly complicated. There's a lot of factors, and there's no easy solutions. But I also wanted to let you know what the Transportation, Land Use, and Housing Committee are doing regarding housing. So we've developed a housing action plan. So, for example, we've developed a letter that was approved by the League Board of Directors and sent out to the 11 county cities and the county. The letter informed these jurisdictions that one, that the League is a long-term advocate of affordable housing. Second, the League will be monitoring each jurisdiction's progress in meeting the state's required housing goals. We welcome the opportunity to provide input into that process. We ask them to share with us their planning strategy for accomplishing their goals. And if they create a housing element advisory group, we welcome the opportunity to have one of our members participate in that committee. The letter was sent out to these jurisdictions on June 10th. And to date, we've received replies from 6 of the 12 jurisdictions. We're in the process of following up with the jurisdictions that we haven't heard from. Also, the Transportation, Land Use, and Housing Committee has been giving more attention to monitoring some of the larger projects. For example, the Northgate Mall project, which Bob referred to in his presentation, the Marin City project, and the Seminary project in Strawberry. So how can you become more involved? The League's ability to monitor the progress of individual housing elements is really contingent upon the number of volunteers we get to perform this work. We need people who are willing to monitor the progress in their communities with the state's housing mandates. This would involve, among other things, monitoring the jurisdiction's housing elements, agendas, observing their meetings, and either attending in person or observing over the internet these meetings, and possibly serving on the Housing Element Citizens Action Committee if those jurisdictions form one. If you are interested in exploring this opportunity, please let me know, and I can provide you with some additional information, and we'll be able to answer any questions you have. In the next week, the Transportation, Land Use, and Housing Committee will be sending out a volunteer recruiting email to all Marin League members, asking them to consider getting involved in this process. So please be on the lookout for that letter. And if you have any questions, please contact me and I'll provide you with some additional information. Back to you, Lynn.
Oh, great. So I did put your contact information in the chat, Kevin. I know that you're sending out that correspondence, but if anybody's interested in contacting Kevin sooner than that, just hit those 3 dots and save the chat and you'll have all these great links. And now we're back to Anne.
Are there more questions for Bob or for Kevin? Okay, well, I have a question, and I'm asking your opinion, Bob. How do you think that the Marin communities are going to do with these housing element requirements? Do you think they're going to be able to pull this off?
To be honest, I'm pessimistic. It's going to be difficult for a number of the cities to plan for these high numbers. The difficulty, again, I don't think is physical. The land is out there. The property is out there. It's a matter of politics and imagination. I think that, one of the things you will hear a lot about is the character of Marin. We have to preserve Marin's character. Well, I think you need to think about that. What is Marin's character? What is the character we're trying to preserve? And people talk about, for example, the small town character. I remember years ago when I started working in San Rafael, we heard about the small town character of downtown San Rafael. But after a while, people kind of changed their minds on that, about what that meant. They really, really valued downtown, but they wanted it to be more lively. And people came to understand that meant you needed to have more people downtown. And the way to get more people downtown was to build housing for them. And so the city changed its policies, but still, I would argue, maintained the essential character of downtown San Rafael. And as a result, they've built hundreds of affordable units and are now building hundreds of market rate units downtown. And I think you're seeing more prosperous downtown than you had 20, 25 years ago. So San Rafael, I would argue, thought about the character of downtown. I think the cities that are going to be really pressed, not so much the Nevados, not so much the San Rafaels, but the Corte Maderas, the Belvederes are going to think about the character that they want, and basically they need to be prepared to accept some density in order to make these numbers. And I think the most important reason to consider increased density is equity. We are the most segregated county in the Bay Area and one of the most segregated counties in California. It is easiest to achieve affordability with density. And so I would argue that density is one of the key strategies to get to equity and to become less segregated than we are today.
Thank you. So Kevin?
I had another question about the failure to meet these goals. I mean, Bob, can you speak a little more about what could happen other than the city being fined? Would there be a possibility of them losing state money? Would a developer be able to go in there and build something without getting local approval? Can you address that issue?
Sure. I don't know as much as I'd like to about enforcement, but you raised one important bit of legislation that's out there called SB 35. What SB 35 says is that if you aren't meeting your housing goals, then your discretion to approve projects may be taken away. What the mechanics of that are that you have a jurisdiction such as Marin County that isn't meeting its goals. A developer comes in, has a property that's identified for multifamily, and proposes to build a 100% affordable project. That project must be approved. No public hearings, no design review, no use permits, just a building permit. And that has already happened in Marin County, down in Marin City. And it appears to be on the verge of happening in downtown Novato, where a 5-story, 100% affordable housing project has been proposed under SB 35. So that's one of the state's enforcement tools to get cities to meet their RENA allocations.
Any other questions? This is such interesting and timely information. Bob, thank you so much. I mean, every day, the IJ has got something about housing.
Yeah.
And it's so helpful to really understand it better in order to interpret what we're hearing. And also to think about how we can advocate for what the league feels is the right way to go. So I encourage all of you to respond to Kevin's request and invitation to get involved. This is important, and it's happening right now. So so look for his email about this. So with that, I want to thank you, Bob, so much, and Kevin also, and also Voter Service for bringing us those wonderful videos and information about this terrific program that we're involved in with the Elections Department and the County Office of Education. So I think that's all for now. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, Bob. It was a great presentation. Thank you.